The lights of Theta Station burned bright against the darkness of space, casting long shadows through the massive windows of the auction house, and inside the grand hall, hundreds of alien creatures gathered to buy and sell the galaxy's most exotic animals. Sarah Okonkwo stood at the back of the observation deck, her dark eyes scanning the crowd of beings that filled the auction floor below. And she marveled at the diversity before her. Tall Valorants with their armored plates and proud bearing, Corinthians with compound eyes that glittered like jewels, crystalline Escheri whose bodies chimed softly when they moved, and dozens of other species she couldn't even name yet. She had arrived on Theta Station only 3 weeks ago, fresh from Earth with a degree in xenobiology and dreams of making a difference in the galaxy. And her supervisor, Dr. Yentris, a patient Escheri with centuries of experience, had brought her to the auction to observe how exotic specimens were acquired for their research facility. Pay attention. Sarah. Dr. Yentris's voice resonated through the translator implant behind Sarah's ear. This is where we find the most interesting subjects for our behavioral studies. Sarah nodded and watched as various creatures were brought onto the auction platform. A pack of razor-tailed hunting beasts from Mordax V, a breeding pair of luminescent sky serpents, even a juvenile thunder lizard that made the entire platform shake with each step. The alien traders bid with practiced efficiency, calling out numbers in galactic credits while the auctioneer, a rotund Corinthian whose mandibles clicked rapidly as he spoke, kept the pace moving quickly. Next lot, the auctioneer announced, and his tone carried a note of dismissal that made Sarah's attention sharpen. Fenrithi specimen, male, 40 cycles. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and Sarah leaned forward to see what was happening on the floor below. The doors at the side of the platform opened, and handlers in protective gear let out the largest creature Sarah had seen all day. And her breath caught in her throat. The Fenrithi stood nearly 12 feet tall at the shoulder, with a body that resembled the wolves from Earth's history books. But this was no ordinary wolf. Its fur was a strange silver-blue color that seemed to shimmer under the harsh auction lights. Its paws were enormous, tipped with claws that could easily tear through metal. And its head was broader and more intelligent-looking than any Earth canine. But what struck Sarah most was the weariness in those amber eyes. The creature moved slowly, almost painfully, and old scars crisscrossed its flanks like a map of battles long past. And its fur, while still beautiful, had lost the luster that Sarah imagined it once possessed. Opening bid at 500 credits, the auctioneer began, his enthusiasm notably lacking. The crowd remained silent. Come now. The auctioneer clicked his mandibles in annoyance. This is a Fenrithi, renowned across the galaxy for loyalty and combat prowess. Still, no one bid. A Valorant in the front row laughed, a sound like grinding stones. That beast is past its prime. Bonding age for Fenrithi ends at 20 cycles, and that one is twice that. Too old for military use, another voice called out. Can't breed anymore, a third added. What's the point? Sarah watched as the Fenrithi's ears flattened against its skull, and she wondered if the creature understood the words being spoken about it. 400 credits? The auctioneer tried again, his tone growing desperate. No response. 300? Nothing. Dr. Yentris made a dismissive chime beside Sarah. Unfortunate, but logical. Aged specimens have limited research value, and Fenrithi specifically are known to bond only once in their youth, so that one is essentially useless now. Sarah felt something twist in her chest, a feeling she couldn't quite name, and she kept her eyes on the wolf creature as it stood there under the harsh lights, being judged and found wanting by an entire room of beings who saw it only as a commodity. Lot dismissed, the auctioneer finally declared, waving his appendages in frustration. Take it back to holding. The handlers began to pull on the chains attached to the Fenrithi's collar. But the creature didn't move immediately, and instead, Its amber eyes swept across the observation deck, and for just a moment, Sarah could have sworn those eyes locked directly onto hers. Then the moment passed, and the Fenrithy allowed itself to be led away. Its massive head lowered in what looked like resignation. The auction continued with the next lot, but Sarah couldn't focus anymore, and her mind kept returning to those amber eyes and the intelligence she had seen in them during a break. She approached Dr. Yentris with a question that had been burning in her mind. What happens to the specimens that don't sell? She asked. Her supervisor's crystalline body chimed softly, a sound Sarah had learned meant mild surprise. They are disposed of naturally. It would be inefficient and expensive to maintain animals with no commercial value. Disposed of? Sarah's voice came out sharper than she intended. You mean killed? Such emotional terminology, Dr. Yentris observed. But yes, they are terminated. It is standard practice throughout the galaxy, Sarah, and quite logical when you consider the resources required to house and feed large predators. Sarah felt her stomach churn, and she thought about that Fenrithy, alone in some holding cell below, waiting for an execution it probably understood was coming. How much would it cost to purchase the specimen? She heard herself as Dr. Yentris's body flashed with colors that Sarah's translator interpreted as confusion and concern. The Fenrithy? Sarah, our facility has no use for an aged, unbondable specimen. Even for behavioral studies, it would provide minimal data. I wasn't asking for the facility, Sarah said quietly. I was asking for myself. The crystalline being stood silent for a long moment, studying her with multifaceted eyes that seemed to see far more than Sarah was comfortable with. Sarah, you have been in space for less than a month, Dr. Yentris said gently. You are still adjusting to galactic society and its practices. And I understand that human cultural values place unusual emphasis on individual animal welfare. But you must understand that this is neither practical nor economically sound. How much? Sarah repeated. Her jaw set in a way that her supervisor was learning meant the human had made up her. Dr. Yentris chimed in what might have been resignation, given that the creature failed to attract any bids. The auction house will likely accept any offer above processing costs, perhaps 200 credits. Possibly less. 200 credits was nearly all of Sarah's savings. Money she had set aside for emergencies, and by any reasonable standard. This was not an emergency, but she kept seeing those amber eyes. I want to buy it, she said. Dr. Yentris's entire body flashed with alarm colors. Sarah, consider what you are saying. Where would you keep it? Your habitat pod is designed for a single human, and Fenrithy require specialized diets, extensive exercise, and even if you could provide all that, the creature cannot bond at its age, so will never truly accept you as pack. And an unbonded Fenrithy is extremely dangerous. Sarah listened to all the logical arguments, recognized the truth in them, understood that what she was considering was foolish and impractical and possibly dangerous. Then she thought about being alone in a cell, waiting to die, simply because the galaxy had decided you were no longer useful. I still want to buy it, she said. And somewhere deep in her human heart, she felt the stubborn determination that had carried her species across Earth's harshest environments and eventually to the stars. Dr. Yentris chimed in a pattern that Sarah's translator couldn't quite interpret, but she suspected it was something like exasperation mixed with reluctant admiration. Very well, her supervisor said, but this foolishness is on your own head. And don't expect me to help when that creature tears apart your habitat pod. Sarah smiled, despite the nervousness fluttering in her stomach. I understand. Thank you. As she made her way down to the auction house offices to arrange the purchase, Sarah wondered what exactly she had just gotten herself into, and whether the creature she was about to save would even want to be saved. But she knew, with the certainty that only humans seem to possess, that she couldn't walk away and leave that being to die alone in the dark. It simply wasn't in her nature. The administrative offices of the auction house smelled strange to Sarah's human nose. Like copper and ozone mixed with something organic she couldn't quite identify. And the clerk who processed her purchase was a being she had never encountered before. Something with too many limbs and eyes that swiveled independently. "You wish to purchase lot 847? The clerk asked, its voice crackling through her translator. "The aged Fenrithy?" "Yes," Sarah said, trying to sound more confident than she felt the clerk's multiple eyes focused on her. And she had the uncomfortable feeling of being examined like a specimen herself. "The auction house is prepared to accept 150 credits for the specimen, which includes basic transport to your designated location." 150 credits, Sarah thought with relief. That was better than she had hoped, and it meant she would still have some emergency funds left. She authorized the payment through her credit chip, and the transaction completed with a soft chime that seemed far too cheerful for what she was doing. "The specimen will be prepared for transport within the hour," the clerk informed her. "Standard protocols require sedation and restraints for Fenrithy specimens, particularly unbonded adults. Is the sedation necessary?" Sarah asked, thinking about how much the creature had already endured. The clerk's eyes all focused on her again with what might have been surprise. "Fenrithy are apex predators. Without sedation and restraints, the specimen could injure or kill handlers during transport. And this one in particular has a history of aggressive behavior toward non-bonded individuals." Sarah wanted to argue, but she recognized that this was not a fight she could win right now. "I understand. Please have it delivered to Habitat Pod 7C in the human residential sector." The clerk made a notation, and several of its limbs moved across a holographic interface. "Very unusual purchase for a human. Most of your species prefer smaller companion animals." "I know it's unusual," Sarah admitted. "Peculiar sentimentality," the clerk observed, though its tone seemed more curious than judgmental. "The specimen was scheduled for termination at the end of the business cycle. You have extended its life, though to what purpose remains unclear." Sarah didn't have a good answer to that, so she simply nodded and left the office, her hand shaking slightly as the reality of what she had just done began to sink in. The walk back to her Habitat Pod took 20 minutes through Theta Station's winding corridors, and Sarah used the time to try to figure out how she was going to make this work. Her living space was a modest cube, maybe 30 feet on each side, with a sleeping area, a small food preparation station, a bathroom, and not much else. And it was designed for one human. Definitely not for a 12-foot wolf creature from another world. She moved furniture, pushing her small dining table against one wall and folding up her spare chair to create as much floor space as possible. And she pulled out every blanket she owned and arranged them in the largest clear area, trying to create something that might pass for a comfortable resting place. Then she raided her food supplies, looking for anything that might appeal to a carnivore. She had some protein bars, a few emergency ration packs, and half a container of something that was supposed to taste like earth. Beef, but definitely didn't. It would have to do. For now, the door chime sounded exactly 53 minutes after Sarah had left the auction house. And when she opened it, 2 Valoran handlers stood there with a large transport crate hovering on an anti-gravity sled. "Delivery for Sarah Okonkwo," the larger Valoran rumbled. "One Fenrithy specimen, sedated and restrained." "Yes." "Thank you," Sarah said, stepping aside to let them maneuver the crate into her pod. The handlers exchanged glances that even Sarah could read as skeptical, and the smaller one spoke up. "You understand what you have purchased, human? This is not a pet. Fenrithy are military-grade predators." "I understand," Sarah replied. "It has been sedated with a standard dose that should last 4 to 6 hours. the larger handler continued. Keep the restraints on until you are certain the sedation has worn off. And even then, approach with extreme caution, because unbonded Ferethi are unpredictable and dangerous. The restraints, Sarah began, are for your protection. The handler interrupted firmly. This specimen has no pack, no bond, no loyalty to you. In its mind, you are either prey or a rival. An instinct will drive its behavior. Sarah nodded, knowing that arguing would accomplish nothing. Thank you for the warning. The handlers left, and Sarah found herself alone with the large transport crate sitting in the middle of her tiny habitat pod. And she could hear breathing from inside. Slow and deep, she approached the crate carefully and found the release mechanism. And with a soft hiss, the front panel lowered to form a ramp inside. The Ferethi lay on its side, its massive chest rising and falling with each breath, and heavy metal restraints bound its legs and muzzle, making it look even more helpless than it had on the auction platform. Sarah's heart clenched at the sight. She knew the handlers had told her to wait, to let the sedation wear off before doing anything. But looking at those restraints felt wrong on a level she couldn't fully explain. This was a being that had already lost everything, its original bond, its purpose, its dignity, and now it lay drugged and chained in a stranger's home. And Sarah couldn't bear to add to its suffering even one more minute than necessary. I'm going to regret this, she muttered to herself. But she was already reaching for the restraint releases. The muzzle restraint came off first, and Sarah held her breath. But the Ferethi's breathing didn't change. Next came the leg restraints, and they fell away with heavy clanks that made Sarah wince. But still the creature slept. Sarah pulled the restraints out of the crate and dragged them to the far corner of her pod. Then she returned to kneel near the crate's opening, close enough to see the Ferethi clearly, but far enough to give it space. The sedation meant for 6 hours lasted only 4. And Sarah knew the moment the creature began to wake, because the breathing pattern changed. Becoming shallower and faster, the Ferethi's eyes opened slowly, and Sarah watched as confusion clouded those amber depths, followed by wariness and then immediate alertness. The creature lifted its massive head, and its eyes locked onto Sarah, and she saw the muscles in its body tense as it prepared to either fight or flee. It's okay, Sarah said softly, keeping her voice calm and low. You're safe here. The Ferethi's ears flattened against its skull, and a low growl rumbled from its chest, and Sarah could see the moment when it realized the restraints were gone, because its eyes widened in what might have been surprise for a long moment. They simply stared at each other, the young human woman and the ancient wolf creature, both completely out of their depth. My name is Sarah, she continued, still speaking softly. I know you don't understand me yet, but I want you to know that I'm not going to hurt you, and no one here is going to hurt you anymore. The growling stopped, though the Ferethi's body remained tense and ready. Sarah slowly reached beside her and picked up one of the protein bars she had set out, and she unwrapped it carefully, making sure her movements were slow and non-threatening, and she held it out toward the crate. I know this probably isn't what you're used to eating, but it's what I have right now, she said. You must be hungry. The Ferethi's nose twitched, and its eyes moved from Sarah's face to the food in her hand and back again. It didn't move toward her, but it also didn't retreat back into the crate. And Sarah decided to take that as progress. She set the protein bar down on the floor, halfway between herself and the crate, then slowly backed away to give the creature space. The Ferethi watched her every movement with those intelligent amber eyes, and Sarah could almost see it thinking, trying to figure out what kind of trap this might be. Minutes passed in silence, and then the Ferethi slowly, cautiously, rose to its feet, and the crate groaned under its weight as it stepped out onto Sarah's habitat floor. It was even larger than Sarah had realized, its shoulder well above her head, and standing this close, she could see the power in its scarred body, the deadly claws, The teeth designed to tear through armor any rational being in the galaxy would have been terrified. Sarah felt calm. The Fenrithy approached the protein bar, sniffed it once, and then picked it up delicately in its massive jaws and swallowed it in one gulp. Then it looked at Sarah again, and something in its expression had changed. Just slightly. "Would you like another one?" Sarah asked, already reaching for a second bar this time. When she held it out, the Fenrithy took a single step closer before stopping. Still maintaining distance, but showing willingness to narrow the gap, Sarah set the second bar down, closer to herself this time, and again backed away. The pattern repeated, and with each offering, the Fenrithy came a little closer, until finally, as Sarah held out the sixth protein bar, the creature stepped close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from its body and smell its wild scent. The Fenrithy took the bar directly from her hand, and its teeth never touched her skin. "There," Sarah said, smiling despite the tears she could feel building in her eyes. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" The Fenrithy sat down, which brought its head closer to Sarah's level, and it studied her with an intensity that made her feel like every secret she had ever kept was being examined. Then, slowly, deliberately, the creature lowered its head and rested its massive muzzle on Sarah's shoulder. The first week with Kes challenged everything Sarah thought she understood about xenobiology, and the tiny habitat pod that had seemed adequate for one human now felt cramped with a 12-foot Fenrithy sharing the space. But somehow they made it work. Sarah learned quickly that Kes had preferences and opinions about everything. He disliked the harsh artificial lighting and would position himself in the dimmest corners. He refused to eat the synthetic meat products from the station commissary, but accepted Sarah's protein bars with something that looked like gratitude. And he had claimed the spot next to Sarah's sleeping platform as his own, curling his massive body into a protective circle each night. The xenobiology facility where Sarah worked became aware of her unusual acquisition within 48 hours, and Dr. Yentris summoned her to the office with a chime that sounded distinctly disapproving. "I have been reviewing your housing situation," the crystalline being said without preamble, "and I must express significant concern about your cohabitation with an unbonded Fenrithy." "Kes hasn't shown any aggression," Sarah replied, trying to keep her tone respectful. "He's been perfectly calm." "Kes?" Dr. Yentris's body flashed with colors. Sarah's translator interpreted as confusion. "You have named it?" "Him," Sarah corrected gently. "And yes, he needed a name." Her supervisor was silent for a moment, and Sarah could practically see the thoughts processing behind those multifaceted eyes. "Sarah, I have been studying xenobiology for 300 of your Earth years, and I have never encountered a case where a Fenrithy of advanced age formed a new bond. And the scientific literature is quite clear. Neural pathways for pack bonding solidified by age 20 cycles, making subsequent bonding neurologically impossible. Maybe the literature is wrong," Sarah suggested. "The literature is based on millennia of observation across thousands of Fenrithy specimens," Dr. Yentris countered. "What you are describing is not merely unlikely. It is biologically impossible." Sarah thought about how to explain what she was experiencing, and she realized that she didn't have scientific terminology for it. "He responds to me," she said finally. "When I'm sad, he moves closer. When I'm happy, his ears perk up. Yesterday, I dropped a container and startled myself, and he was between me and the door before I even registered moving." "Conditioned responses," Dr. Yentris said. But there was uncertainty in the chime now. "Basic pattern recognition and self-preservation instinct. And why does he bring me things?" Sarah asked, pulling out her datapad. "This morning, he brought me my jacket when I was getting ready for work, and I hadn't asked for it. I hadn't even been thinking about it out loud." Dr. Yentris's entire body went still. "That is pack behavior," the being said slowly. "Anticipating needs providing care without prompting. Those are indicators of deep bond formation. So maybe it's not impossible. Sarah said quietly. Her supervisor's body cycled through several colors rapidly. I would like to observe this phenomenon myself. With your permission, of course. Sarah hesitated. Protective instincts flaring. Will it hurt him? Merely observation. Nothing invasive, Dr. Yentris assured her. If what you are describing is genuine, Sarah, it would represent a significant discovery in xenobiology, and it would challenge our fundamental understanding of interspecies bonding. Over the following days, Dr. Yentris visited Sarah's habitat pod multiple times, and each visit seemed to deepen the crystalline being's confusion and fascination. Cass tolerated the observations with patient dignity, and Sarah noticed that he positioned himself so that he was always between her and Dr. Yentris. Not aggressively, but protectively. Remarkable. Dr. Yentris chimed during the fourth visit, watching as Cass carefully maneuvered his large body around Sarah's small furniture without knocking anything over. He is spatially aware of your belongings, treating them with care. This suggests he views your territory as pack territory. He's careful not to break my things, Sarah agreed, scratching behind Cass's ears in a spot she had learned he particularly enjoyed. May I try something? Dr. Yentris asked, and at Sarah's nod, the crystalline being stepped closer to Sarah than previous visits allowed immediately. Cass's posture changed. His ears flattened, his lips pulled back slightly to reveal teeth, and a low warning growl rumbled from his chest. Fascinating, Dr. Yentris said, immediately stepping back. Clear protective behavior. He views me as a potential threat to you specifically. Sarah placed her hand on Cass's head, and the growling stopped instantly. He's just being careful. You're not human, so he doesn't know your intentions. But he knows yours, Dr. Yentris observed. He trusts your judgment enough to override his own threat assessment when you signal that I am safe. Sarah, do you understand what this means? That he's smart? Sarah offered. That he is bonded to you, Dr. Yentris said. And the chime carried a weight of scientific certainty, against all established understanding of Fenrithi neurology, against every documented case in the literature. This creature has formed a primary pack bond with you. News of the impossible bond spread through the xenobiology community on Theta Station with surprising speed, and within 2 weeks, Sarah found herself fielding requests from researchers across multiple facilities who wanted to study Cass. She refused them all. He's not a lab specimen, she told Dr. Yentris firmly. I didn't save him from termination just to subject him to invasive studies. I understand your protective instinct, a supervisor replied. But consider the implications. If one aged Fenrithi can bond, perhaps others can as well, and this could save countless lives. Spare many creatures from termination simply because the galaxy believed they were past bonding age. That argument gave Sarah pause, and she discussed it with Cass that evening. Sitting on the floor of their habitat pod with his massive head resting in her lap. They want to study you, she told him, running her fingers through his silver blue fur. To understand how we bonded when it shouldn't have been possible, and maybe it could help others like you. Old ones that the galaxy has given up on. Cass made a sound soft and contemplative, and Sarah had learned to read his vocalizations even without a translator. But I won't let them if you don't want it, she continued. You've been through enough. You deserve peace now. The Fenrithi lifted his head and looked at her with those amber eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. And then he did something he had never done before. He placed his massive paw on her hand. Gentle despite the deadly claw, Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. Okay, she whispered. We'll help them understand. But only non-invasive stuff, and I'll be with you the whole time. The research that followed was groundbreaking. And Dr. Yentris led a team that studied Sarah and Cass through observation, neural scans, and behavioral analysis. And what they discovered changed the scientific community's understanding of bonding. The key, they found, was not in the Fenrithi's neurology, but in the humans' approach. And Rathi bonding traditionally occurred through dominance displays and pack hierarchy, with the alpha establishing control through strength and intimidation. And this method worked only during the creature's youth when neural pathways were still forming. But Sarah had approached Cass with something different: respect, kindness, and equality, and she had never tried to dominate him, never treated him as lesser, never demanded his obedience. Instead, she had offered friendship, and friendship, the researchers discovered, could bypass the traditional neural pathways entirely, creating new connections based not on pack hierarchy but on mutual trust and affection. It is very human, Dr. Yentris observed during one of their research sessions. Other species bond through strength, through genetic imperative, through symbiotic necessity, but humans bond through empathy, through the simple act of caring. And apparently, that can reach even those the rest of the galaxy has deemed unreachable. The research attracted attention beyond Data Station, and reports began circulating through galactic networks about the human who had bonded with an aged Fenrithi. And the story resonated in unexpected ways. Other aged Fenrithi, previously destined for termination, began finding new homes with humans who had heard Sarah's story. And research facilities started re-examining their assumptions about other species thought to be unbondable past certain ages. Sarah watched these developments with mixed feelings. Pride that she had helped spark change, but also protective worry about whether all these humans understood what they were taking on. Bonding is not magic, she told a reporter from the Galactic Science Network. It requires patience, respect, and genuine care. You cannot approach it as if you are saving something. You have to approach it as if you are meeting someone. Cass, sitting beside her during the interview, rumbled his agreement, and the reporter, a Corinthian whose mandibles clicked with excitement, focused all his compound eyes on the Fenrithi. How do you explain the bond from your perspective? The reporter asked Cass through a translator. Cass was silent for a moment, and then his response came through the translator in a voice that was rough from disuse, but clear in meaning. She saw me when others saw nothing. She offered kindness when the galaxy offered ending. How could I not bond to such a heart? Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. Cass, I didn't know you could. The translator could speak? Cass's translated voice held warmth. I chose silence for many cycles after my first bondmate died, but you made me want to. The trouble arrived on a Tuesday morning in the form of a Valoran military contractor named Thorax. And Sarah knew something was wrong the moment. Dr. Yendris summoned her to the facility's main conference room. Instead of the usual lab, Thorax stood nearly 9 feet tall, his armored plates gleaming under the conference room lights, and his eyes held the cold assessment of someone who had spent centuries evaluating assets and making calculations. Miss Okonkwo, he rumbled, his voice needing no translator. I am Thorax of the Valoran Defense Syndicate, and I am here regarding the Fenrithi specimen currently in your possession. Sarah felt Cass tense beside her. She had brought him to work that morning, as she often did, and now his protective instincts were clearly activated. His name is Cass, and he's not a specimen. Incorrect, Thorax said, pulling up a holographic display. Military designation VDS 8847. Assigned to Commander Vex of the 3rd Fleet. Lost in action 15 cycles ago. Sarah's heart sank as she looked at the documents. Purchase orders, transfer records, military service logs, and at the bottom, in clear galactic standard text, a lease agreement that had never been closed. The creature was military property, Thorax continued, leased to Commander Vex under standard terms. Upon the commander's death, the Fenrithi should have been returned to VDS custody, but due to administrative error, it was instead sold to various civilian traders. That was 15 years ago, Sarah protested. You're only claiming ownership now because he's valuable again. Thorax's expression didn't change. The timing is irrelevant. Ownership rights do not expire, and with the specimen now demonstrating renewed capability and rare bonding potential, the Valorant Defense Syndicate wishes to reclaim its property for military service. Dr. Yentris chimed urgently. Surely there is room for negotiation. Miss Okonkwo purchased the Fenrithy in good faith, and the bond they have formed is scientifically unprecedented, which is precisely why the military wants him back. Sarah said bitterly. Not for service, but for study, to figure out how to force bond other aged Fenrathi. Thorax neither confirmed nor denied this. Miss Okonkwo, you have two options. Surrender the specimen voluntarily, or we can pursue legal reclamation through galactic courts, which will be costly for you and result in the same outcome. Cass growled. Low and dangerous, and Sarah placed her hand on his head, trying to calm both of them. There's a third option, she said, the words coming before she fully thought them through. Oh. Thorax tilted his massive head. Valorant tradition, Sarah said, remembering something she had read during her xenobiology studies. Trial by gauntlet. If Cass and I can prove our bond is stronger than you claim, you have to recognize it. The conference room fell silent, and Dr. Yentris's body flashed with alarm colors. Sarah, no. The gauntlet is designed for young, prime specimens in peak physical condition. It is also binding under Valorant law, Thorax said, and Sarah could hear interest in his voice now. If you successfully complete the gauntlet, the Valorant Defense Syndicate will relinquish all claims to the Fenrithy. However, failure means immediate forfeiture, and you should understand that the gauntlet has a mortality rate of approximately 30% for bonded pairs in their prime. What would it be for us? Sarah asked, given the human's physical limitations and the Fenrithy's age? Thorax considered. I estimate your survival chance at less than 5%. Sarah, this is madness, Dr. Yentris pleaded. Let me try to negotiate a settlement. Perhaps the syndicate would accept financial compensation. No, Sarah interrupted, looking at Cass. They want to take him back to military reconditioning, turn him into a weapon again. I saw his eyes at that auction, and I won't let him go back to that. Cass made a sound, deep and resonant, and through the translator his words came clear. Little human, you would risk death for me? You're my friend, Sarah said simply. That's what friends do. Thorax watched this exchange with what might have been curiosity. Very well. If you wish to invoke trial by gauntlet, I will arrange it, and be aware that once you enter, you cannot withdraw. Completion or death are the only exits. When? Sarah asked. 3 days, Thorax replied. That will give time for proper arena setup and for observers to gather. This will be quite the spectacle after Thorax left. Dr. Yentris spent an hour trying to convince Sarah to reconsider, bringing up every logical argument, every statistical probability, every reason why this was a terrible idea. Sarah listened patiently, then said, I understand your concerns, but I'm doing this. Why? Her supervisor asked, genuine confusion in the chime. Help me understand this human tendency to choose emotion over logic. Sarah thought about how to explain. Because logic says Cass should have been terminated at that auction. Logic says we never should have bonded. Logic says that aged beings have no value once they stop being useful. But I believe something different, which is that every being deserves dignity, that friendship matters more than utility, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is stand beside someone when the whole galaxy says they're not worth it. Dr. Yentris was quiet for a long moment. I will never fully understand humans, the crystalline being finally said. But I am beginning to appreciate why your species has made such an impact on galactic society in such a short time. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. And Sarah researched everything she could find about the gauntlet, studying old recordings and interviewing anyone who had witnessed one. The challenge consisted of 5 stages: the Maze of Shadows, requiring navigation through darkness while avoiding automated threats; the Wall of Ascent, a vertical climb with crumbling handholds; the Bridge of Trust, a narrow crossing over a significant drop; the Trial of Separation, where bonded pairs were temporarily divided; and the Final Stand, a combat simulation against holographic opponents. Each stage was designed to test different aspects of bonding: communication, trust, coordination, and loyalty. "We can do this," Sarah told Kes on the evening before the gauntlet. Though she wasn't sure if she was trying to convince him or herself. "You are small and soft," Kes observed, but his tone was gentle. "The gauntlet is designed for armored species with natural weapons and enhanced physical capabilities. I'm also creative, adaptable, and stubborn," Sarah countered. "Humans have survived on a planet that tried very hard to kill us for millions of years. We're pretty good at making do with what we have." "What we have," Kes rumbled, "is each other. And perhaps that is enough." The morning of the gauntlet arrived with stunning speed, and Sarah woke to find herself in the arena preparation room, a stark white space that smelled of disinfectant and nervous anticipation. Dr. Yentris was there, along with several other researchers from the facility. And they had brought gifts: a lightweight harness designed to help Sarah climb, nutrient packs for quick energy, even a small medical kit. "We are not permitted to help during the gauntlet," Dr. Yentris explained, "but we can ensure you are properly equipped beforehand." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, all of you. Don't die." "Sarah," Dr. Yentris said, and the unusual directness of the statement made Sarah laugh despite her nerves. "I'll do my best." The arena itself was massive, a converted cargo bay that had been transformed into a deadly obstacle course, and viewing platforms surrounded it on all sides. Filled with curious onlookers from dozens of species, Sarah spotted Thorax on one platform, surrounded by other Valoran military officials, and she wondered if they had bet on her failure. Probably, she thought, and then decided not to care. The starting gate opened, and Sarah and Kes stepped into the arena together, and the crowd noise faded as they entered the Maze of Shadows. Darkness enveloped them immediately, so complete that Sarah couldn't see her own hand in front of her face. But she felt Kes's warm bulk beside her and his steady breathing in the black. "Stay close," she whispered, placing her hand on his shoulder. "Your nose is better than my eyes. Let your senses guide us." They moved slowly, carefully, and Sarah learned to read Kes's body language. When he tensed, danger was near. When he relaxed, the path was clear. When he changed direction, she followed without question. Automated threats emerged from the darkness: stunning nets, mild shock fields, disorienting sounds, and each time, Kes would position himself between Sarah and the danger, while Sarah would use her smaller size to find alternative paths around obstacles. They emerged from the maze bruised but successful, and the crowd made appreciative sounds at their coordination. The Wall of Ascent loomed before them, a sheer face rising 50 feet, and Sarah looked at Kes with concern. "You're too heavy to climb," she said, "but I think I can make it up if you can catch me if I fall." "Climb." "Little human," Kes said, "I will be your safety." Sarah began to climb, using the harness and her own determination, and twice she slipped, and twice Kes was there, using his massive body to break her fall and cushion her landing. On the third attempt, Sarah reached the top, and she found a control panel that lowered a platform for Kes. The Bridge of Trust was exactly as described: narrow, unstable, and terrifying, and Sarah went first. A lighter weight, less likely to destabilize the structure halfway across. A section gave way beneath her feet, and she felt herself falling. And then Kes's jaws closed around her harness, his teeth never touching her skin, and he pulled her back to safety. The recording of Sarah and Kes completing the gauntlet spread through the galactic networks with astonishing speed, and within a week, it had been viewed billions of times across hundreds of worlds. What captivated viewers wasn't just the unlikely victory, but the way they had achieved it, not through dominance or superior strength, but through genuine partnership, mutual trust, and a kind of stubborn compassion that seemed uniquely human. Sarah woke one morning to find her message inbox flooded with thousands of communications, and she scrolled through them with growing amazement. There were messages from other humans, asking for advice on bonding with aged specimens they had rescued. Messages from alien researchers requesting interviews. Even messages from Fenrethi themselves, thanking her for showing the galaxy that they had value beyond their prime years. The Archress visited that afternoon, the crystalline being's body chiming with barely contained excitement. "Sarah, you need to see this." The supervisor pulled up a holographic display showing data from across the galaxy. Aged Fenrethi adoptions had increased by 3,000% in the past week. Other species previously considered unbondable past certain ages were finding new homes. And most significantly, several major governments had passed legislation prohibiting termination of aged specimens without attempting rehoming efforts first. "You changed the law," Dr. Janitor said. Wonder in every chime. A single human girl and her impossible bond changed galactic policy. Sarah felt overwhelmed. "I just wanted to save one being. I didn't mean to start a movement." "That is perhaps the most human statement I have ever heard," her supervisor replied. "You act from the heart, without considering galactic implications. And somehow that changes everything." Kes, resting beside Sarah, as he always did now, rumbled his agreement. The galaxy needed someone to show that kindness is not weakness. That value is not determined by youth or utility. And humans seem particularly gifted at such demonstrations over the following months. Sarah found herself thrust into an unexpected role as an advocate and educator. And she gave talks at xenobiology conferences, wrote articles for scientific journals, and consulted with facilities across the galaxy on ethical treatment of aged specimens. She always brought Kes with her, and his presence spoke louder than any words she could offer. Here was living proof that the galaxy's assumptions about age and bonding were not immutable facts, but rather limitations of imagination. One particular invitation caught Sarah's attention. A request to visit Fenrith Prime, the Fenrethi homeworld, to speak at their Council of Elders. "They want me to talk to them about you," Sarah told Kes. "About us, about how we bonded. Then we should go," Kes said. And Sarah heard something in his voice she hadn't heard before, anticipation mixed with old pain. "I have not been home since I was taken for military service at 15 cycles. It would be good to see the ice fields again." The journey to Fenrith Prime took 2 weeks aboard a commercial transport, and Sarah spent much of that time learning about Kes's home from his stories. He told her about the endless winters, about the aurora lights that danced across frozen skies, about pack structures and traditions that went back thousands of generations. And he told her about his first bondmate, Commander Vex, and the grief that had silenced him for so many cycles. "Vex was a good being," Kes said softly. "Valoran, but with an unusual capacity for honor. When he died, I thought my purpose died with him, and I expected to follow him into the dark. But you didn't," Sarah said. "No," Kes agreed, "because a small human decided that an aged wolf deserved dignity. And she taught me that bonds can be rebuilt, that life can have second chapters. That hope is not only for the young." Fenrith Prime was stunning, a world of blue ice and silver snow. And Sarah had never seen anything so beautiful or so harsh. The Fenrethi Council met them at the spaceport. A group of 12 ancient wolves whose combined age exceeded 600 cycles. and they regarded Sarah with curiosity and Cass with something that might have been recognition. "Young Cass," the eldest said, her voice rough but warm. "You were taken from us many cycles ago. We did not expect to see you again." "I did not expect to return, Elder Frey," Cass replied. Lowering his head in respect, Elder Frey turned her attention to Sarah. "And you are the human who has caused such disruption in galactic thinking. You are smaller than I expected." Sarah smiled despite her nervousness. "I get that a lot." "Tell us," another elder said. "How did you accomplish what our own kind believed impossible? How did you bond with one so aged?" Sarah considered her answer carefully. "I think the real question is not how I bonded with Cass, but why your species stopped believing it was possible." The council made various sounds of surprise and interest, and Elder Frey's ears perked forward. "Explain." "Fenrithi bonding traditionally occurs through dominance and pack hierarchy," Sarah said. "But that's not the only way beings can connect. Humans bond through friendship, through mutual respect, through simply caring about another's well-being without needing to establish control. And you believe this can work with any Fenrithi, regardless of age?" A younger elder asked skeptically. "I believe it can work with any being who still has the capacity to trust," Sarah replied. "Age doesn't eliminate that. Grief and mistreatment can damage it, but kindness can rebuild it." Elder Frey was silent for a long moment. "Your words challenge traditions that have existed since before your species left their homeworld." "Young human, I know," Sarah said, "and I'm not trying to say your traditions are wrong. I'm just offering another option, another possibility. Because I've seen too many beings like Cass marked for termination simply because the galaxy assumed they had nothing left to offer. What you are describing," Elder Frey said slowly, "is a form of bonding our ancestors practiced long ago, before we became involved in galactic conflicts and military service. We called it soul walking, the joining of two beings through shared experience and mutual understanding rather than through dominance." Cass's ears shot forward in surprise. "Elder, I have never heard of such practices, because we abandoned them," Elder Frey said, sadness in her ancient voice. "When we joined the galactic community, we adopted what others expected of us: hierarchies, dominance, utility as the measure of worth. And in doing so, we lost something essential to our nature. This human," another elder said, "has inadvertently reminded us what we once were." The council meeting lasted for hours, and Sarah found herself not lecturing but conversing, sharing observations and listening to stories of ancient Fenrithi culture that had been nearly forgotten by the time they departed Fenrith Prime 3 days later. The council had made significant decisions. They would reintroduce soul-walking training for young Fenrithi, establish sanctuaries for aged members of their species, and send ambassadors to other worlds to teach what Sarah had helped them remember. "You gave my people back part of themselves," Cass told Sarah as their ship lifted off. "That is a gift beyond measure." Sarah watched Fenrith Prime shrink below them. "You gave me something too, you know. What is that?" "Purpose," Sarah said, understanding that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply be kind to one being who needs it, and trust that the ripples will spread from there. They returned to Theta Station to find that Sarah's modest habitat pod was no longer adequate for their growing responsibilities, and Dr. Yentris had arranged for them to move into a larger research suite that could accommodate both Sarah's work and Cass's considerable size. Xenobiology facility had also undergone changes. A new wing dedicated to ethical specimen care, with strict protocols against termination without exhaustive rehoming efforts. And Sarah had been promoted to a newly created position, Director of Interspecies Bonding Studies. "I still don't know what I'm doing half the time," Sarah admitted to Cass one evening as they reviewed research proposals. "Neither does anyone else," Cass replied, amusement in his voice. That is the nature of pioneering new understanding. You make the path by walking it. Years passed, and Sarah and Kess's partnership became a fixture of life on Theta Station. And they trained other human-alien pairs, consulted on bonding difficulties, and continued to research the science behind cross-species friendship. Sarah watched as the aged Fenrithy she had helped save found their own bonds, their own second chances, and each success felt like validation of that impulsive decision she had made at an auction so long ago. On the 5th anniversary of their bonding, Sarah organized a gathering at the facility, and dozens of human Fenrithy pairs attended, along with representatives from other species who had formed unlikely bonds of their own. Dr. Yentris, now considered one of the galaxy's leading experts on human-facilitated bonding, gave a speech that made Sarah cry. 5 years ago, a young human taught us that value is not measured in youth or utility, but in the capacity for connection. And that capacity exists in all of us, regardless of age, regardless of species, regardless of what the galaxy tells us is possible or impossible. Later, as the celebration wound down, Sarah and Kess stood at the observation window, looking out at the stars. "Do you ever regret it?" Kess asked quietly, taking in an aged Wolf who should have been impossible to bond with. Sarah leaned against his warm bulk. "Not for a single moment. You're the best decision I ever made."